Applied Teaching Topics, Tricks for Teaching Pronunciation, Module 2, Unit 3. Here's a short little clip of a pronunciation lesson.
I would like to buy a hamburger.
I would like to buy the hamburger.
I would like to buy the hamburger. This is the Pink Panther, Steve Martin playing the Pink Panther. He has a problem with pronunciation. Does he need to speak with native pronunciation? Actually, he does not. He just needs to be understandable. So this is the question we want to answer. How good do you need to be able to pronounce a foreign language? And the answer is so that you can be understood. You don't need to sound like or exactly like a native speaker. Just be understandable. So the question is, how do you do that? And in the short clip we saw there, the Pink Panther, Inspector Clouseau, was not having a successful lesson with his pronunciation teacher. So we're going to talk about how to teach pronunciation. Very simple overview. My name is Professor Joseph Polshock, and this is Elemental Linguistics. Good pronunciation. So Penny in her great little book, 100 Teaching Tips, says that she says, of all the aspects of language, pronunciation is probably the one that needs the least teaching. So you don't have to do it too much, just enough to help your students. And then often I like to refer to Paul Nation and his 4 strands. And he suggests that we teach pronunciation using the 4 strands with meaning-focused input. So that would be listening to stories so that students can understand how English sounds and also enjoy messages at the same time. Meaning-focused output, so they say things that are meaningful messages. Again, communicative teaching. And then fluency practice, so they can practice their fluent pronunciation of English. And then finally, language focus, where they focus on the nuts and bolts, the sort of grammar of pronunciation, if you will. If you're interested in getting Penny Er's book, there's a link to Amazon to get it. It's a great little book. So let's start out with this idea of listening and the word the. Nation suggests that we start with lots of listening because we need to hear how English sounds, and we want to do that through stories and messages that are easy. So focus on easy stories and easy messages where the learners know almost 100% of the language they hear, so they can hear how English sounds or whatever language they're learning to pronounce. For English, Nation suggests that students get familiar with the word the because 1 in 15 words in the English language is the. So every time you read or hear 15 words, you're going to hear the word the once. It's the most common word in English. And this TH sound, the, is a really common sound, therefore, in English, and learners need to be familiar with it. And there are many words that use this sound: that, this, these, those, then, they, there, and then. So learners need to be familiar with this sound and how to pronounce it. For example, where to put the tongue in their mouths when they pronounce this word, and so on. So listening to lots of stories, but also getting familiar with this most common sound in English. We also can look at pronunciation about the level of the problem. So what is causing the problem? What is causing a person's pronunciation to not be communicative, to hinder or stop communication? Could it be at the phoneme level, at the basic sound level? For example, the difference between V and F, or the and 3. These are different sounds. Are at the basic sound level? Is that the problem, the level of the problem? Or is it maybe words that are difficult to pronounce? For example, the word virus is very difficult for Japanese learners to pronounce. At least they're not used to hearing it because it's pronounced, and I'm not going to do this very well, uirusu is kind of the way it's said in Japanese. Also the word theme. In Japanese, you have the TH sound, which is not common in Japanese, but also the word theme in Japanese is said tema, so there's a little bit of confusion there. And also the TH sound and the S sound at the end of close is a difficult one. So it could be at the word level or the sound level. It could also be at the level of phrases and intonation, which is important. There's sort of this sort of set of patterns that happen in English phrases, and we'll look at that a little bit later. But how would you say this phrase in natural English? I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. So which level do we need to focus on? That's one set of questions that we can ask ourselves as we teach pronunciation. Also, learners need to be aware of voice and voiceless sounds, or voiced and voiceless sounds. One way to do this is to get a small piece of paper and practice voiced and voiceless sounds with students. Put the paper in front of their lips, and for example, let's look at these words with these sounds P, P, T, and K. We can also put our hand here and feel the sound, so P, T, K, P, T, K. We can see what happens with the sounds also with B, D, and G. So if we look at B and D, P and B, for example, P, P, B, B, one is voiced and one is not voiced. There's also aspirated sounds, for example, please and stop. So the P at the beginning of a word, piece of paper, is different from the P at the end of a word, like stop, stop, stop. And so these are different kinds of physical things that happen with sounds, and it's good for learners to become familiar with these voiced and voice sounds, or aspirated and non-aspirated sounds, and so forth. One kind of practice that students can do is called distinguishing practice. So with distinguishing practice, you get a list of pair words. They're usually called minimal pairs because they have one different sound in them. For example, here's a list: bus, buzz. So only one sound is different. It's the S and the S and the Z in the buzz, right? So one sound differentiates these words: plays and place, rise and rice. So for this distinguishing practice, first it's a listening activity, so don't show the words to the students. And you'll have a chart up on the screen or on the chalkboard, and the students will answer with a 1 or a 2 depending on which sound you say. Let me show you how this works. After they do the distinguishing practice, they can practice the pronunciation. So here is the chart up on the screen. I'm going to say the word. You tell me if it's a 1 or a 2. Bus. The answer, it's a 1, right? Next word, buzz. 1 or 2. Correct, it's a 2. And so we can see those words now, bus and buzz. Next one's plays. 1 or 2. It's a 2, right? And then place. 1 or 2. And that will be a 1. So then we can show the words. This is just one way of doing it. Next two, rise. 1 or 2. Correct, it's a 2, right? And then lastly, rice. 1 or 2. And it's a 1. And so then we can show the words and they can see how that works. We could also then practice saying them. This is very much focusing on the language, but it's a good way of helping students first distinguish and then say these words. One of my favorite pronunciation techniques is called the Morey technique. It comes from Dr. Paul Morey, who is a doctor of fine arts in music, based in Santa Barbara, California. And he has this fourfold technique for teaching phrases, intonation in English. So he says English sentences go from high to low. Then when we speak in English phrases and sentences, we stress the meaningful words. We also connect the words and phrases. They're not chopped up into pieces, but we connect them. And lastly, we voice the function words on the offbeat. So I'm going to try to demonstrate this for you, kind of exaggerated way. This is the Morey technique. So first, speak high to low. I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. That's an exaggeration, but it sort of seems to fit like the natural pattern of English. So repeat after me. I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. Very good, right? So let's do this next step, stress the meaningful words, and I'll snap my fingers on each meaningful stress. I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. And you can do it also with the high to low. I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. Also notice that the words connect. It's not I feel more, but I feel more. I feel more. Repeat again. I feel more. I feel more. I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. A little bit of exaggeration here. And then the last thing is the function words kind of go on the offbeat. They don't disappear. So more like I do now than I did when I... So when I got here. When I got here. I don't emphasize when. It's kind of on the offbeat. I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. When I got here. When I got here. So when is kind of on the offbeat. So this is a rough summary of how the Morey technique works for teaching pronunciation, especially the pronunciation of phrases. Another technique that I like to use is the paired speed read aloud, which is a fluency speaking or fluency reading aloud technique. So in pairs, students take turn reading an easy story out loud. After one pass, so partner A, after partner A reads for 1 minute, he or she underlines the words that he or she had trouble saying. So the one person who reads out loud, one person listens. As they finish after 1 minute, they underline the words that they had trouble saying, and then the teacher can go around the room and say which words were hard, and then they can practice pronouncing them. So it's like they do it in real life, and then they get some feedback like that. So here's how it works, right? So after they do it one time, they go back again for the second time for fluency, and they've already had a little bit of practice with the words that they had trouble with. So here's what it might look like, a story from my website, readoasis.com. You can see it's a story. It's about growing your mindset, but it tells the story of Michael Jordan and how he got cut from his high school basketball team. So there's a little bit of conflict and drama in it. Here are the directions, right? So in pairs, partner A reads aloud from A from the beginning for 60 seconds, and partner B listens. When they hear the alarm, they stop reading, and then they mark a place where they stopped. Here's where you can now give that feedback. Which words did you have trouble with? Okay, and then practice pronouncing those. And now partner A starts again, repeats steps 1 through 2 again, reads for 60 seconds. And the second time, they usually read about 10 to 20 or 30, 40 more words. And then they can take turns from a different place, and you can repeat the process, giving feedback again after that first time they read through the text like that. So they're telling a story, but when they make a mistake or have trouble, they're getting feedback and they're learning pronunciation in that context. So let's finish up. In summary, remember that we want to focus on understandable. Can we make our pronunciation understandable? Doesn't have to be like a native speaker. You don't have to sound like a native. Just be understandable. Teachers can use the 4 strands. So meaning-focused input, so they get listening practice and hearing what English sounds like. Meaning-focused output, if they make a mistake, they get some feedback and they can fix their pronunciation. Fluency practice, so they can get a flow with their pronunciation like that. And also focusing on language focus, little bits and pieces of the language as well to practice and learn pronunciation. Students often get stuck on words and sounds like the micro level or the macro level, but oftentimes it's better to focus on phrases because phrases carry the message. And so we can get that phrasing pattern natural. People will probably understand how or understand what we want to say. So that is all I have for today. Thank you for listening.